I'd like to welcome you to the third annual Windows security event thrown by Black Hat, held here in Seattle. I'm Jeff Moss and your host, and I wanted to welcome you all to Seattle. I'm sure many of you are from Seattle, probably because it's the home of Microsoft. But for the people from out of town, I'd like to say we paid extra for this weather. It's not normally this nice this time of year. So that's probably why you saw a nominal fee increase on your purchase price. Okay, we've got a couple of announcements to make, and then we'll start off. I'm not into really long keynote introductions. If you've attended before, you'll know I just like to point out what's going on with the show and then let you guys figure out the rest. So let us just say that we know that you know about the hotel network. That's enough said. So, play nice. The reception tonight is on the 35th floor. Starts at 6 p.m. and there'll be book signings up there. Eric Burkholz and a few others will be signing books. There'll also be a book signing at lunch. If you're interested in the book signings, Breakpoint Books has all the books from all the authors that will be signing. So if you want to know who's signing and when it'll be happening, just go over to Breakpoint Books and he'll be happy to tell you who's doing what and when. We also have a little Black Hat store there. You might have seen some people wearing these black polar fleeces. We've tried that. That's new this year. Some people said they wanted some kind of apparel, something. And since we are in the cold time of year, we tried fleeces. We probably aren't going to be selling them in the summer show. We also have a couple Orinoco Gold wireless cards left if you want to get onto the conference network, which has been up and running for a couple days. So far, nobody's figured out how to take it down. And what else do we have? Oh, we have these cool little silver vacuum bottles, too. Let's see. We want to turn off all of our cell phones to minimize our annoyance factor. I think it's just only fair for the speakers if they're not distracted by people chatting on their phones. Also, we're constantly trying to improve the quality of our shows, and one of the ways we try to do that is we have paper feedback at this show, but we also have an electronic feedback server, which is mentioned, I think, on the network topology sheet that you should find in your bag. Your username and password to log into the feedback server is on the receipt portion of your badge. And if you type in your password incorrectly too many times, you get locked out for 15 minutes. And we'd like to thank Arjuna from Microsoft for finding some problems in the feedback server last night. Nothing critical, but we know there are a few bugs. We're not going to tell you what they are. But knock yourself out. If you find bugs, we'll buy you a beer, as long as they're different than the ones we've already found. And then that makes it a little bit more bulletproof for later shows. See if we have anything else. Oh, yes. So 3 people who do provide feedback will be chosen randomly. The first place prize, you'll get a free admittance to a future Black Hat for free. And then the second place prize is you just get a polar fleece, and the third place prize is your choice. I think it's a vacuum bottle or a polar fleece. So we'll notify you through email and put your names up on the website, and you'll know that you won. Okay, so let's start this thing off. Our first keynote for the day one is Scott Culp from Microsoft. Many of you may have met him or communicated with him in his previous job position. He's changed departments. He's in Trustworthy Computing now. And Scott's official title is Senior Security Dude in Trustworthy Computing team. And he's part of the Trustworthy Computing the project, and his presentation today will be dealing basically 1 year later, what's changed, what's to come in the future. And with that said, I'd like to introduce Scott Culp and hand it off to him. And once again, thank you for making the show such a great success. And the Awake Tea is actually very functional. Thank you. This is when you applaud.
First technical glitch. how to get the wireless mic onto my belt. There we go. I'm the technical guy. It was a hardware problem. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I think this is our third year as one of the sponsors of the conference. And this is a really important conference for us for a couple of reasons. It gives us an opportunity to speak to a really important community for us, the folks who administer and manage and run our systems every day. But it also gives us, we've got sort of an ulterior motive here. We have a selfish motivation, namely, this is an opportunity for us to hear from you what we need to do next. So while we certainly want to encourage everybody to learn as much as you can to make the best use out of the Microsoft speakers and the other speakers who are here, I also want to encourage you to grab any Microsoft person, and if you can't find the Microsoft people, then look for me. Tell us what we're doing wrong, tell us what we're doing right, what you need, comments, suggestions, you name it, we want to hear all of it. That's what we're here for. As Jeff mentioned, I used to work for about the past 5 years. I was manager of the Microsoft Security Response Center. I recognize a few familiar faces from the work that I did there. Within the past several months, I changed roles, and I'm now with the Trustworthy Computing team under Scott Charney. So, of course, you know, what would a Trustworthy Computing team guy talk about other than trustworthy computing? In January of last year, Bill Gates committed the company to a very aggressive initiative that we called the Trustworthy Computing Initiative. When we started this project out, we knew two things. We knew that the mountain we were going to have to climb was awfully steep, and we knew that it was awfully high. But we were committed to making the climb anyway. So 13 months in, we've cleared some of the foothills. We've got a feeling for the terrain. We're getting up around the tree line. We've got a feeling now for what this mountain feels like. Most of the mountain is still in front of us. This is a 10-year climb. So most of the mountain is still in front of us. But we've got some accomplishments to talk about. We've also had a few setbacks that we want to talk about. So I'm going to take about the next 45 minutes or so, walk through the philosophical underpinnings, some of the basis for the initiative that you may or may not have heard of, and then walk through what we've done, what we're going to do. The Internet's done some wonderful things for people. Information technology's done wonderful things for people. You've got almost an amount of computing power on your desktop that was unimaginable 10 years ago. We've got opportunities to communicate with each other that we didn't have 10 years ago. We've got all kinds of benefits that the technology has delivered to us, and what has always mattered until now has been delivering more of the same. More productivity, easier communications, whatever it was that made people want to buy the systems and use the solutions, we just needed to do more of it. We realized some time ago that that was changing. There are benefits that are technologically feasible, but which people don't want because of issues that can only be described as issues of trust. I'll give you an example. Not too long ago, I read a story about a couple of guys who had developed a piece of hardware for putting a pacemaker onto a wireless link and putting it on the internet. I see people laughing already. You know where I'm going with this. They thought this was the best thing since sliced bread, and they're right. If this thing works, a person with a pacemaker, if their heart gets in trouble, somebody can be monitoring it. They can call the ambulance for them. You don't even have to go see the doctor. The doctor can monitor the health of your heart, can make adjustments in the pacemaker right over the wireless network. You don't even have to go into the doctor's office. Does anybody want one of these things? I know I don't. And why? It's not because the technology is deficient. I mean, I'm worried about it, you know, if I had one of these things, I'd be worried about it for a couple of reasons. The first thing is, here I am having that ventricular fibrillation, and I'm telling myself, okay, just sit on the couch, they're going to send the ambulance, and of course I'm going to be sitting right in a null, in the, you know, I'm going to be sitting in a wireless null or something like that, or the system will be down, or who knows what, and so I'll be sitting there waiting for the ambulance, and it never comes. I'm also a little bit worried about the privacy aspects of this, because I don't particularly want people to know whether I've got a pacemaker, and the fact that every time I walk past a DHCP server, it goes nuts and starts handing out IP addresses to my heart, that's going to be kind of a sign to people, and I may not want people to know, you know, I may not be real keen on that. But the main thing is, I don't want to be somebody's wear site. The last thing I want is somebody hacking into old Culp's heart. It's kind of a dramatic example, but you can probably think of others. And I bet that every one of you, every one of your companies has something that it would like to roll out to your customers that it can't because of similar types of things, similar issues of trust. Winter of 2001, we commissioned a survey to try to understand what it was that made people trust certain industries, what they considered the elements of trust to be, to try to understand what this dynamic was. The survey looked at over 100 people, can't remember the exact number, a broad cross-section of professions, technical expertise, and so on. And they asked them things like, what does trust mean to you? What industries do you like? What do you like about them? What industries do you not like? Why don't you like them? This sort of rolls up the findings of that study. And here's how to read the chart. There are 10 industries that the survey looked at. And at the end of the study, they asked people to rank those 10 industries. Which ones are in your top 3? Which ones do you trust the most according to your definition of trust? Which 3 do you trust the least, and which 4 are in the middle? Top 3, middle 4, bottom 3. What you see here is each of those 10 industries, and how many people, the green bar at the top is how many people put that industry in their top 3. The kind of brownish bar is how many put it in the middle 4, and the blue bar at the bottom is how many put it in the bottom 3 in terms of trust. Look where the internet is. Good Lord, only 6 people put it in the top 3. 30 people said it was in the bottom 3. When you look at the mean scores, it's even worse. The only industry that fared worse than the internet was the cable industry. There's a serious problem here. What's also interesting is to look at which industries did well. And in particular, I want to focus on the energy sector. Now remember that this survey was done during winter of 2001. There were grayouts in California. There were allegations that energy companies were artificially manipulating the cost of energy. There were stories about kickbacks to state politicians. And yet the energy sector still came in second in terms of trust. Now why is that? It tells you something about the residual, that reservoir of trust that people have in our power systems. And it's well-founded. If I go over to one of those little plugs on the wall and stick my appliance, plug my appliance into it, I get power. Every time. And I don't just get power. I get 110-volt, 60-cycle, stable, clean power every time. And that appliance that I plug into it, it's probably got an underwriter's laboratory listing on it. I got a pretty good idea I'm not going to get shocked when I plug it in. The wiring in my house, I've got the National Electric Code to fall back on. I've got best practices. There's a code of conduct for the industry. And finally, personally, I trust the power company. If a line goes down in my front lawn and I do lose power, a little person with a hard hat and a truck comes out and makes me whole again, and they don't charge me to do it. This is the kind of an experience that we need to emulate, and this is the kind of a relationship with our customers that we seek. This is the underpinning of the Trustworthy Computing Initiative, is to do the things we need to so that in our industry, we can have a reputation like power and healthcare and some of the other industries that people trust. It's important to Microsoft to do that because, of course, we supply a lot of the software that runs the internet. But we think it's also important to our customers because you all are likely part of the internet industry as well in some form or fashion. So we think this is important to the entire industry. Now, when we thought about what trust means for Microsoft, we concluded that there were 4 elements of trust. First, our systems need to provide security. It needs to protect the data that's on the system from unauthorized use. They also need to provide privacy. Privacy is sort of the flip side of security. Security is technical means to protect the data on the system from somebody who's not authorized to view it. Privacy is what are the policies that the people who are authorized to use it are going to follow when they're handling the data. Are they going to respect your privacy? Are they going to respect the personal information that you've trusted to their system? Reliability. Is the system going to be up when you need it? And finally, and in some ways, most importantly, business integrity. It's a little more of a nebulous, it's the most nebulous of the 4 pillars. But what customers told us over and over again was that trust involves not just the quality of the products, but the reputation of the vendor. Does that company talk to them honestly? Does the company have integrity? One customer who was part of that survey made a really strong and important point about this and said, I may disagree with the business decisions that you as a company make, but I'll at least respect them if you tell me why you made them and if it's a believable explanation. Now, I'm going to drill on security because that's what we're here for. But those other 3 pillars are there, and it's important to understand that TWC is about pushing forward on all 4 pillars. But drilling for the rest of the time here into security, we developed a framework for grading ourselves, for trying to identify what things we needed to do and how well we were doing them. We believe that if we accomplish these 4 objectives, that we'll be delivering the security on the security pillar of trustworthy computing. And there's a similar framework for the other pillars. Secure by design. Basically, there are 2 aspects here that are really important and they're intertwined. First one is there a good solid design? Has somebody got a solid architecture that will deliver security, and then have they done a faithful implementation of that architecture? A good solid architecture with a lousy implementation equals no security, and a good solid faithful implementation of a lousy design equals no security. If you don't have both, you haven't got security. Security by default. When our products install on somebody's system, they need to install in a way that's secure right out of the box. The attack surface needs to be as small as it can be. The number of attack vectors needs to be minimized. The number of services that run by default need to be as small as possible. And everything needs to run with the least privilege possible. So let's say we're delivering these solutions that have a good, solid, secure design and that we've implemented faithfully and which install on your system in a way that makes them secure by default and minimizes the attack surface. If we haven't given you information that tells you how to manage, deploy, and use those systems, we still fail. And finally, from a security perspective, it's really important that there be a very clear security commitment, that we walk the talk every day, that we demonstrate the commitment, live up to it, that we communicate with you in an open and honest way, and that our communications be timely, accurate, and most of all, relevant. So let's walk through these and see how we've done. The secure by design part of the initiative is the one that has probably gotten the most attention because the most dramatic activity we've had over the past year has been the security pushes. Is there anybody who, show of hands, how many people have heard about the security pushes that we did over the last year? It seemed to capture people's imaginations, captured their attention, got a lot of attention, a lot of visibility. We stopped the development process on Windows Server 2003. We said we were going to do it for a month. We were going to send all of our developers to training in basic security techniques, and then we were going to not build any new code for a month. We were going to go back. We were going to do threat modeling on all of our code. We were going to do line-by-line review of all of our code. We were going to bring in third parties and ask them to help us review our code, because we believe that we hire pretty smart people, but we know there are a lot of other smart people out there, and we want to leverage all the brains we can. It turned out that February of last year was an unusual month because February of 2002 had 60 days in it. We said we were going to take a month doing this, and we actually wound up taking about 2, February and March. We never really declared an end to the push. We're still doing little mini pushlets even today. We're very close to locking down Server 2003 and shipping it, and yet even so, we're still going back every so often and double-checking code and rechecking our answers. We're going to keep doing that right up until the minute it ships. In the process of doing this, we trained over 11,000 developers at Microsoft in basic security techniques, invested huge amounts of time and money, and when we finished with the Server 2003 review, we moved on to other products. SQL Server 2000 did a security push. Visual Studio.net did one. Office XP did one, and in sort of true Office style, they didn't call it the security push, they called it the Office Security Smackdown. At the same time that we were working to make sure that at the same time that we were focusing on the design of our products, we also looked at the design of our organization, and we created 2 new business units to help make sure that we were doing the right things. Security Business Unit, which lives in the Windows division, owns the security of specific products, and they own security products as well. ISA Server, for instance, Palladium, which is now next generation secure computing base, if you can say that. You can say all that in one breath. Some developmental security projects that we aren't talking about quite yet. Some of the security tools that you may have seen, MBSA and so on. Those all come out of Security Business Unit. Security Business Unit owns those tools, and they own a lot of the methodology and engineering quality work across the company. Now, it's got a twin in the Trustworthy Computing team. That's the team that I work on. Trustworthy Computing team doesn't own any products. We work across the company in sort of an inspector general role, the conscience of the company around trustworthy computing. We own the Privacy Center lives in our group. Some of the code level experts who help with the security pushes live there. We've also got people who are working to change the culture. For instance, we're building a continuing education program for developers around security. So we're not just going to send them to one course and teach them basics. If you want to be a developer at Microsoft, you're going to have to participate in an ongoing series of continuing education courses around security. This is part of being a professional software developer at Microsoft. You're going to have to get good at security, and you're going to have to stay good at security. We're also working to change the culture in the most tangible way possible. We're working to get security built into all the performance reviews at Microsoft. Everybody, come review time, is going to have to talk about what they did for security. And then finally, we increased our investment in the security of future products. A well-kept secret is that Microsoft is one of the top 5 companies worldwide in terms of R&D money spent, just money spent on basic R&D. We spend over $1 million per working minute on basic R&D. And over the past year, we tripled the amount of spending that we're doing on R&D for security. 40% of our budget for R&D is now devoted to security technologies of one type or another. Okay, secure by default. When you see one of these dialogues as you're installing a product, you ought to see something just like what's shown up here. Most of the boxes ought to be deselected, and when you see radio buttons, that top one ought to be set. In Server 2003, 20 services that used to be turned on by default now are not. That's as compared to Windows 2000, which itself had fewer services running by default than previous versions. Even when they're running, many of the services are now running with lower privilege. Of course, the service that most people are interested in Server 2003 is IIS 6. So let's talk a little bit about what we've done with IIS. It's not installed by default. It's not running by default. If you do install it and you do turn it on, the first thing that happens is the IIS lockdown tool runs. Show of hands, how many people have seen the IIS lockdown tool? Cool. It's working. The IIS lockdown tool is going to run. It's going to interview you about what this server is intended to do. Are you serving static web pages or are you serving dynamic web pages? Because if you're only serving static web pages, I can turn a whole bunch of stuff off. Do you want to do FTP? No? Cool, I'll turn that off too. It's going to go through and it's going to make sure that not only is the system, not only is IIS not running unless you asked for it to be turned on, but it's going to be running with the absolute smallest attack surface possible. I believe URL is also built into IIS 6. And one of the coolest things about IIS 6 is an architectural change that was made. How many people have used IIS to run a website? Okay, keep the hands up. How many are running your ISAPIs out of process? Okay, a couple. This is better than usual. Few people run the ISAPIs out of process. And the reason is performance, because there's a big performance hit if you take those things out of process. Here's a perfect example of the truism that performance and security are not antithetical. They can reinforce each other if you do things right. We spent a lot of time reworking the IIS kernel to make it a lot more, to make it the performance a lot faster, specifically so we could turn on process isolation by default at a worker thread level. Worker threads are going to run by default in user context, and process isolation will happen by default. We were able to buy that by getting additional performance out of the code. Of course, the other advantage you get from having better performance is smaller web farms, and we all know smaller web farms are more secure, if only because you can manage them a little more effectively. Last good example for what happens around the defaults is Office XP. How many people are familiar with the Outlook email security update? Like it? Hate it? Yes? No? Okay, the OESU was released, oh boy, it's probably been 3 years now, in the wake of Melissa and I Love You. What the update does is it changes the way Outlook works, so that Outlook will block by default executables that are attached to emails, won't let you launch them by double-clicking. And it also creates an object model guard. If a program tries to access the Outlook object model, for instance, to send out a bunch of emails, user's going to get a pop-up dialog that says, hey, user, there's a program trying to send a whole bunch of mail out. Is this something you really want to allow or not? You say no, doesn't happen. That update is highly effective. In fact, we've referred to it at times as the most effective antivirus measure on the planet, because to the best of our knowledge, and it is imperfect, but to the best of our knowledge, worldwide, the number of people who, after installing the OESU, were subsequently hit by an I Love You or Melissa type virus, 0. We don't know of anyone who has ever been hit by a Melissa or I Love You type virus after installing this. But when we talked to customers about it and asked them what they thought, one really common comment was, it's too draconian. It turns off everything. Makes it too hard to use. I need some performance and I need some usability that I don't have if I install this update, and I need some managerial flexibility. So when we rolled out Office XP, we included the OESU as part of Office XP, but we added a lot of management interfaces, a lot of flexibility, the opportunity to tune that thing to do exactly what you want it to do. That's the model for how this works. Sometimes we go a little bit too far and we lock things down a little too much. We get feedback from customers. We bring it back so that at the end of the day, we're balancing usability versus security and giving you the best of both. Okay, secure in deployment. Fall of 2001, we rolled out a big program called the Get Secure, Stay Secure program, the intent of which, summed up right there in the name, get people onto a secure, stable baseline for as many of our products as possible, and then make it easier for them to stay up to date on patches and so forth moving forward. As part of that, and as an extension of that work, we delivered just a slew of security tools over the past year. Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, 2 versions of it. The initial version and version 1.1 came out in the fall. The IIS Lockdown tool, URL, a bunch of SQL security tools. We rolled out an advanced version of Windows Update And we also rolled out software update services, better known as roll your own Windows update server in your own enterprise. The reviews, by and large, have been good, but one bit of feedback that we've gotten, and we understand we need to do better at, is we need to provide better holism. There needs to be an integration of those tools. Anybody who has suggestions, I would love to hear more about. This is an area that I'm personally interested in. I'd love to hear more about what tools you need and what we can do for this tool suite to make it better for you. Probably the most dramatic thing we did in terms of on the secure by deployment front, though, is the completion of our common criteria evaluation for Windows 2000. Now, one of the really common criticisms of the government evaluation programs in the past has been that they're not particularly relevant for real life. They evaluate the operating system, but they don't evaluate all the superstructure that surrounds the operating system. They evaluate the operating system in certain scenarios, but they don't really look at that whole ecosystem that the operating system is going to work in. Well, when common criteria was rolled out, we saw an opportunity to do an evaluation that had real meaning, and so we jumped on it and we drove it for everything it was worth. We could have finished an evaluation of just the basic OS and a couple of basic scenarios in very little time. But we thought it would be a lot more useful to customers if we gave them something that they could actually use in real life. So we spent 3 years, and I don't even want to think about how much money, going through the full evaluation, not just for our base operating system, but for Active Directory and our implementations of L2TP, IPsec, PPTP, EFS, and a whole bunch of other letters. We did the evaluation not only in sort of standalone mode. I think at last count we were up to like a half a dozen different scenarios that we had evaluated. The basic scenarios like a standalone server, standalone workstation, a domain controller, multi-master directory server, application servers, web servers. If you take a look at the documentation for our common criteria evaluation, you should find some really useful information about how to configure those systems for different roles and how to use them securely. Okay, communications. Here's the poster child for communications. Michael and David, are Michael and David here? Well, if not, they're going to be here. I think they're going to do a book signing, get their autograph and all that kind of thing. Writing secure code. 3 huge benefits for this from the development of this book. Microsoft itself got huge benefit because this is basically the Bible for secure development at Microsoft. This is the textbook we use. But by rolling it out in a book form, this gave us an opportunity to share those best practices with developers in the customer community. And we're also, most recently, taking an additional step of pushing that book out into the academic world as well. Addison Wesley is going to build a textbook version of writing secure code that's going to be used in college courses. The book's in its 2nd edition. The 2nd edition basically contains updates to bring you up to speed on everything that we learned coming out of the security pushes. How much did we learn coming out of the security pushes? We'll judge it from this. The size of the 2nd edition is twice as thick as the 1st edition. That's how much information we learned from doing all those security pushes. Other areas where we've tried to improve the way we communicate with our customers, Security Response Center. Bulletins, there's now 2 sets of bulletins. There's the traditional IT Pro bulletin, and there's also a home user bulletin that basically just says this is what you need to do, why you need to do it, and how you need to and how to do it. We rolled out virus alerts. Product Support Services is sending out to customers and personally contacting them when we see viruses that seem to be particularly dangerous. We've also done a wholesale rework of our websites. We've basically built a curriculum. Said, okay, start with somebody who, let's say, build a matrix. How much time have you got to spend, and what's your technical level? 5 minutes to a couple hours, complete novice to IT pro. We're filling in that matrix with documentation that should serve each one of those needs and each one of those audiences. Those are some examples of some traditional communications that we've been doing, but there are some unusual ones that we've started lately that are also interesting. And one of the most interesting is the source licensing programs that we've recently rolled out. We have 3 of them. One for enterprises, one for institutions of higher learning, and one for government organizations. Why are we doing this? Well, here again, back to that point again about there being a lot of smart people. Smart people don't just work at Microsoft. There are a lot of smart people out in the community whose brains we want to leverage. A lot of customers, a lot of organizations have got high-powered security experts who want to be able to see the code and judge the quality for themselves, and we want to give them the opportunity to do that. For institutions of higher learning, in many cases, they're doing basic research on security assurance, on the soundness of designs, and we want to support that work. So we're giving them full access to our source code as part of this licensing program. We added a new twist to the government source licensing program recently with a new program called the Government Security Program. The idea there is that we'll not only share the source code, but we'll also provide additional help where government organizations need it to roll out secure infrastructures, because we know that government organizations tend to be the most highly targeted of all of our customers. So it's particularly important that we give a little extra help where we can to help them secure those infrastructures. And then finally, we created a number of customer councils because we really want to make sure that what we're doing here matches what you need. We really want to make sure that we're talking with our customers and learning from them. We've had customer councils for a number of industry verticals for a while now. Financial services and a couple other industry verticals. We recently, though, rolled out, just within the last week, we announced the formation of the Trustworthy Computing Academic Advisory Board. And this is a pretty neat little endeavor. 19 universities worldwide representing a really diverse range of expertises. There are security people, there are privacy people. There are technical experts, there are policy experts. Thought leaders on public policy, thought leaders on things like IT policies. US, international. There's something in this for both them and for Microsoft. For Microsoft, the benefits are pretty obvious. We want to hear from the people who are doing research. We want to hear from thought leaders. What do we need to do? Get their feedback on what we're doing. But there's a benefit for the academic institutions as well, because knowing what an industry leader is doing can help inform the direction of their academic research. So we've had a lot of accomplishments, and we're pretty proud of them. But as I mentioned, we've had some setbacks as well. Just a show of hands, how many people would say that their networks were severely disrupted by Slammer? Okay. How many would say their networks were moderately disrupted? And how many would say that their networks were minimally disrupted or not disrupted at all? Man, I love you guys. I love you guys. This is great. Okay, so coming to Black Hat pays off. This is a better, a better set of demographics, I guess, than we typically see. We've typically seen about 1/3 in each of those buckets. So it's gratifying to see that the people who are coming to this conference tended to be the least, have the smallest numbers of people who were severely impacted by the worm. That's really good news. This was a criminal act. Microsoft is working with law enforcement to try to find the person or people who did it and to take appropriate action. But it's interesting to take a look at, to kind of go back through and do sort of a pathology of the attacks and understand, what happened and why. The vulnerability that was used by the worm was reported to Microsoft in, I believe, in June of last year. And in July, we released patch 39, which had the first fix for that vulnerability. The fix was included in 3 succeeding bulletins, culminating in patch 61, which was released in November of last year. Fix was also included in SQL Server 2000 Service Pack 3, although in fairness, we do have to acknowledge that Service Pack 3 had only been available for about a week at the time that the worm attacks happened. When MBSA 1.1 was released in the fall, we gained the ability to scan SQL Server machines and MSDE machines and identify the ones that needed the patch. And then finally, when the worm attacks actually did happen, we're proud of the mobilization that happened at Microsoft. We certainly wish that it hadn't been needed, but we are proud of the fact that Microsoft as a company rallied around making our customers whole. We had thousands of people in, starting with the Saturday that the worm hit, and there were people who didn't go home for literally weeks. And these were people not just at Redmond, but people out in the field, people in our sales organizations, our TAMs working with premier customers, people were doing outreach to the critical infrastructure protection sector. The company really turned on a dime and put its full resources behind trying to do a solid, rapid response. But the patch uptake was lower than we would have liked, and the success of the worm is all the proof we need there. The patch wasn't available on any of the automated update sites. Windows Update is restricted to shipping patches for products that ship on the Windows CD. Office Update likewise is restricted to shipping the patches for products that ship on the Office CD. So the SQL patches, not shipping on either, weren't available on either of the automated update sites. Furthermore, the patch required a manual installation. There wasn't a point-and-click installer. The reason for this is because of the complexity of some of the SQL environments, the fact that you can have multiple instances, the fact that database servers are often clustered. That complicates how the patch installer works. But just the same, starting last summer and through the fall, the SQL team had been working to build an installer and had completed the installer in November, shortly after Bulletin 61 shipped. So when the worm hit, one of the reasons why we were able to re-release Bulletin 61 so quickly and provide an installer was because we had completed that patch, we had completed the installer just a couple of weeks before. The real joker in the deck was MSDE. Show of hands again. Of the people whose networks were severely disrupted, how many of you, in how many cases would you say that the disruption was primarily because of infection of your production database servers? Show of hands. And in how many cases would you say that that the primary problem was the infection of the unmanaged workstation space where MSDE was running? I don't see too many hands for either. I'm not sure where all the people have gone. We've typically seen those numbers about 50-50. But MSDE was certainly the wild card here. MSDE is an embedded version of SQL Server. It's redistributed in a number of Microsoft products and in a number of third-party products. The penetration of that software into those products was not well characterized. And to compound matters, some of the products that redistributed it customized it in a way that either made it difficult to know that the systems needed to be patched, or which required additional steps to apply the patch. In talking with literally hundreds of customers since that worm hit, they've made four things abundantly clear. Customers expect us to reduce the number of vulnerabilities in our software before it ships. When a vulnerability is found after shipping, they expect us to fix it quickly. They expect us to give a good, solid, high-quality patch. The patches need to be easy to install. They need to incur minimal disruption of your management and business environment, and we need to provide the tools and information that are going to help customers operate these environments securely. We've absolutely heard you. we're absolutely going to do our level best to deliver on all 4 of those. These 4 components are all components of trustworthy computing that we have been pushing on for the last year, but the clear message is we need to go faster, we need to do a better job on them, and we're going to. Putting this into the SD3+C framework, let's talk about secure by design. As I mentioned, the SQL Server 2000 team did complete a security push. The results are in Service Pack 3. We're going back to SQL Server 2000, and we're repackaging it. Service Pack 3 is going to be in the box from this point forward with SQL Server 2000. When you open that box, you're going to find the Service Pack 3 CD right there in the box so that you don't have to go onto the network to get the patches. All the fixes are right there on the CD so you can be secure before you ever touch the network. We're also instituting tighter management control of redistributed code like MSDE. We're going to have a better idea who's using it, how they're using it. We're going to control how they use it. We're going to try to make sure that, that as few customizations happen as possible. Where customizations happen, we're going to control them so that it doesn't interfere with the application of patches. The next version of SQL, which is currently named Yukon, I don't think it's been assigned a real name yet. The next version of SQL Server was already slated to be much more secure out of the box, but we've gone back and we've revisited some of those settings, and we've tightened them down even more. Multiple instancing is not going to happen by default. We won't be listening on UDP by default. And MSDE will not be network aware by default. You're going to have to enable network awareness on MSDE. As I mentioned, we have completed a SQL Server patch installer. Future patches are going to be easier to install. We're also working on a consolidated update site, hasn't been assigned a name yet, that patches for all Microsoft products will ship on, as well as patches for third parties who want to use the service. We're going to open it up and let third parties use it if they want to. Finally, we started a big effort to improve the patch management experience. We started that back in December. About a day or so after we closed down the rapid response operation for Slammer, I sent a note out to the other folks who are part of this patch management effort, and I said, okay guys, consider your schedules all cut in half. Tell us what the resources are you need to make this happen. We don't have a lot of time to get our patch management story straightened out and to make patch management easy and manageable for our customers. We need to do it now. One of the things we heard from customers, particularly with regard to the MSDE problem, was that home users in many cases weren't reading the IT Pro bulletins because they were pretty deep, and they wanted something that was geared more to them. We recently rolled out a subscription service to get the home user version of the bulletin for free. Anybody can sign up for it. We'll mail you the bulletins every time they come out. Another big effort we've got underway is as proud as we are of the way the company turned around and tackled the problem. It was accompanied by an awful lot of kind of running in circles. Could be streamlined a lot better. We want to do a better job of when large-scale attacks of any kind happen, we want to be better at mobilizing quickly, getting the resources out to you that you need, getting information to you as we learn it, not waiting until we've got the final answer, but telling you what we know, when we know it, and when we're going to know more, and when we're going to tell you more. We want to do better outreach. We want to provide tools faster. And there's a team that's working on building a process that will allow us to do all of this more effectively. We're all security people. We all know the same Moore's law that lets us deliver more power to people's desktops is, of course, providing more power to the bad guys. The same Metcalfe's law that tells us that as the internet and other networks get bigger, they become more usable, they become more efficient at sharing information, they become more valuable. That same law tells us that as computer criminals develop more efficient networks, as more people start doing this, as more people start sharing tools and so on, that we're going to be in for continued series of attacks. Our architectures have got to respond to meet the new threat environment, but we need to be realistic that we're never going to be done. And that's actually one of the underlying messages with the whole Trustworthy Computing initiative. There was a widespread misperception when we first announced this initiative that this was like a one-year program. We were going to do this for a year, we were going to just fix everything, and then we were going to declare it done, and off we go. This is a 10-year program at minimum, with at least 4 phases. And we're maybe at the end of the first phase. The first phase is where we go back to all the products that are in customers' hands today, and we do the work that's necessary to make those things solid and secure. Doing the security pushes, releasing the fixes in the form of service packs and security patches and so on. We're maybe at the end of that. The next thing that happens is we get to start rolling out products that have been designed and built for trust right from the beginning, and Server 2003 is going to be the first delivery, but it's not going to be the last. Looking forward in several years, some of that R&D that we're investing in today is going to start paying off in the form of systems like next generation secure computing base, and some other systems that are on the drawing board today. The end result, though, is invisibility. Security people have a habit of saying that security is invisible until something bad happens. Well, invisibility is not such a bad thing. It's until something bad happens that's the bad thing. Trust ought to be an invisible, seamless, accepted part of all of our products. If we build those into our products, you can deliver the benefits to your customers. We'll reap some of the benefits ourselves. So going back to that sort of imagery from the beginning about this tall, steep mountain that we're climbing, we think we sort of know what the rest of the journey looks like. We know what the near term looks like, and we're getting a feeling for what the long term looks like. The one thing we do know is that mountain is very steep and very high. But we're absolutely committed to climbing it. We think the view is going to be spectacular when we get to the top, and we invite you all to share the view when we get there. So, enjoy the conference. If you have questions, comments, feedback on anything we're doing, grab me or grab any other Microsoft person here. We absolutely want to hear what we need to do for you. So with that, do we have time for some questions? Okay, yeah, 1 or 2 questions. And then if there are additional questions, just grab me any place. Okay, well, enjoy the rest of the conference, and look forward to talking with you all.